Hi. Do you find yourself helping even when you don't want to? Do you find yourself dropping everything when you perceive that there is drama unfolding in somebody's life? Does it feel like you're always helping everybody else, but nobody is helping you? Does that make you feel sad? Do you wonder why you never have any time for yourself? Well, you've come to the right place. This is Hug Me, I'm Insane, and my name is Perry Johnson. What in the heck is people pleasing? Well, I think many of us have a concept of the term people pleasing. The bigger challenge is in understanding exactly all the ways in which it manifests, and more importantly, if we ourselves are people pleasers. Because here's the number one biggest challenge in identifying our own people pleasing. And that is the message that I am being a good person, that I'm being a loving person, that I'm being a caring person, that I'm being a decent human being, that I'm being helpful. Giving a hand to and helping and caring and loving other people is absolutely one of the most admirable traits of being human. The problem when you're a people pleaser is that the person doing the helping very often has very, very low self-esteem. And what ends up happening is we begin to put other people's needs ahead of our own. People pleasers will often drop everything and come running to the rescue, or they'll spend a lot of time obsessing about the well-being of the people that they love. And if you were listening to my codependency episode, one of the traits of codependency is people pleasing. And it's very common for codependents to have the trait of people pleasing. It doesn't happen 100% of the time, because every once in a while you'll see somebody with codependency who has almost no people pleasing attributes, and yet they're still highly codependent. But people pleasers almost exclusively all suffer from a low self-image and will often engage in negative dialoguing about themselves, with themselves, sometimes subconsciously without even realizing it. And this is the problem, is that we don't often see these things operating, and so it's difficult for us to understand what is motivating us. And that is certainly true in the case of people pleasing. So I can give you an example in terms of my own life. My people pleasing shows up in two different ways. The first way it will manifest itself is when I perceive somebody to not like me, when I encounter what we term as a hater. And that person may dislike me, or they may just be indifferent towards me, or they may actually like me. And that's largely irrelevant, because the only thing that matters is what I'm perceiving that person to be thinking about me, which will in turn motivate me to kick into people pleaser mode, where I will go out of my way to be that good, loving, decent, caring person to that individual, with the aim of proving that I'm lovable. The reality is that most of the time, this person plays a peripheral role in my life, and I will waste an extreme amount of emotional energy attempting to prove this quality about myself to little, if not no avail. Because what ends up happening is I just end up looking like this crazy person who is suddenly leaping into action to help somebody that may or may not require any help, or any whatever it is that I'm doing, like paying their bill, or picking up something for them, or showering them with gifts, or whatever it is, however it's manifesting itself. I just end up looking kind of ridiculous. And often it will achieve the opposite effect. And one of the things that's really helped me in that area is the serenity prayer, which is, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, which is the other person, or my perception of the other person. Because again, I don't know. It's what my brain is telling me. And so the serenity prayer says I have no control over that person, and to give me the courage to change the things that I can, which is myself, and to know the difference. That's them and this is me. And so in incorporating that ethic, it's kept me largely out of that people-pleasing mode with the haters, with the people that I perceive to be either indifferent or to dislike me, even if they actually do dislike me. I know that I'm a good person, and their reasons for disliking me are their own, and still could have nothing to do with me. It's not incumbent on me to go out of my way to prove myself that I'm a good person to anybody. The important thing is for me to understand that I'm a good person and worthy of love and a decent human being. The second way that my people-pleasing will show up is in relationship. My codependent nature will inspire me to, again, bend over backwards for my partner in an effort to prove that I'm lovable. And this comes back to the same thing again of self-esteem and my relationship with myself. It has nothing to do with the other person. I don't have to prove that I'm lovable. There are things incumbent in terms of what constitutes a healthy relationship and my behaviors in that relationship. But my people-pleasing will crop up as a way of attempting to squash or circumnavigate the low self-esteem and the fear of abandonment. And so by going out of my way and losing all focus on anything to do with myself and putting it all on the other person, I'm now shifting myself away from having to look at myself. And I'm shifting myself away from having to confront those feelings of low self-esteem and fear of abandonment. People-pleasing is a fantastic distraction. And this is the conundrum, is because, again, our heads are telling us, I'm being helpful, I'm being helpful, I'm being helpful. But in fact, what's really happening is, number one, a lot of the time the other person can be doing these things for themselves, or somebody else can be helping them with these vitals that we think are so important. And I'm also now not having to look at Perry. The more time goes by and the more that I exercise that muscle and practice not focusing on myself and focusing on the other person, the more entrenched the people-pleasing gets and the worse my codependency becomes. One of the byproducts of people-pleasing is that pleasers will often end up depressed and resentful and telling themselves the story that, why doesn't anybody look after me in the way that I look after everybody else? Which is really the pissy pot. It's self-pity. But we're not understanding that we're doing that to ourselves. And this can be a tough nut to crack because, again, we're confronted with this notion of I'm being a good person. And many of us have that entrenched from a very, very early age where everybody comes ahead of the self. There are entire family dynamics based on that highly dysfunctional teaching and belief system. And so in order to begin practicing healthy boundaries where we begin to put ourselves first, that can very often throw family dynamics into disarray. But if you want to understand one of the causes, one of the roots of pleasers who are often pouting and resentful and depressed, it's because of their pleasing. The real irony, though, in being a pleaser is that it's motivated in wanting to connect with others. And yet this relentless disease to please gets in the way of true connection with others. So if you already know that you're prone to people pleasing, what are some ways that you can utilize to help shift you out of it? So here's a few things. The first is to ask yourself, am I acting out of fear of upsetting someone? Are you motivated by this idea that if I don't do this thing, somebody will be upset with you? Often what pleasers find is by confronting this fear and having boundaries around allowing people to do things for themselves or work things out for themselves or seek help elsewhere, that nothing happens. People just pivot and life carries on. That's right. Life carries on despite us not coming to the rescue. Mind blown. And this is another thing that you can ask yourself. Do I even care about this task? Is there anybody else that can do this? Very often the answer is, no, I don't care about this task. And yes, there's somebody else that can do it. You can ask yourself, do I actually have time to do this? You can ask yourself, do I have the energy to do this? And you can ask yourself the question, if I do this thing, will I end up resentful? Now, it's one thing to say, okay, I understand what you're saying, Perry. I recognize these qualities in myself, but the prospect of not engaging in people-pleasing behavior is terrifying. Because the problem is that by removing this mechanism that we have practiced most of our lives, no longer engaging in that mechanism is going to bring up fear. No matter what it is that we're faced with that we have to change, the nature of change, as perceived by our ego, is that it will bring up fear. And so again, it comes back to the old paradigm. We're more comfortable with old problems than new solutions. And the reason is because of the resistance that will come up. And so to help overcome that resistance, I'm going to suggest some affirmations that will help inspire you subconsciously to make these shifts. The thing to understand about affirmations is that when we start practicing them, we will experience pushback in the form of resistance, in the form of a voice that will begin arguing. This little voice will come up and it will say something to the effect of, that's total bullshit. That's a lie. This is stupid. What are you doing? I feel foolish. This is ridiculous. This is our ego trying to keep us small and afraid. And again, affirmations are a way of informing us subconsciously so that eventually that voice that comes up and tells us that we're not worth it and that all of this is a bunch of crap will fade away. And we'll begin to live into a healthier existence, a happier existence. One with less resentment and more serenity, more self-love. So here are some examples of some affirmations. Number 1, my needs are as important as anybody else's. My needs are as important as anybody else's. Number 2, I care about myself enough to say what's best for me. I care about myself enough to say what's best for me. Heck yeah. Number 3, and this one will fly in the face of the pleaser mind. Others benefit from me being open about my needs. Let me say that one again. Others benefit from me being open about my needs. Number 4, I can ask for help, and I deserve to have my needs met. I can ask for help, and I deserve to have my needs met. And the last one, number 5, I'm not being selfish when I self-advocate. I'm expressing my humanness. I am not being selfish when I self-advocate. I'm just expressing my humanness. Because if we don't ask for what we need, how can we get what we need? Makes sense, don't it? So I'd like to suggest that you rotate through those affirmations. Maybe put a different one up on the bathroom mirror every week, or meditate on one for a week, and then switch it to the next one. And also know you'll probably have to rotate through these a few times before they stop feeling weird, because they're going to feel really bizarre to say in the beginning. There will be a part of you, again, as I said earlier, that'll try and talk you out of this as being a bunch of crap. That is the disease to please, fighting for its life. But know that you deserve to have the life that you want. You just probably weren't taught that. So I'm here to tell you that you absolutely do deserve the life you want. And the world needs you living authentically and having your needs met and being your best self. And I'm also going to end by saying that working through this stuff is often bigger than we are. And you may want to consider getting somebody to support you through this, a counselor or a mentor or a coach or somebody. And even though your best friend or whoever the most important people in your life are have your best interests at heart, they may not be the best people to support you through this, simply because they're going to have their own emotional resonance with your people-pleasing tendencies. You might take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back, which in turn may inspire some feelings of frustration in them. And now you'd have to navigate that on top of these changes. And this is the problem with getting our besties to help us with these major life changes. It's not that they can't be there for us. But what I'm getting at is that a professional will have separation, will have emotional distance, and will be able to impartially support you, even if you're not successful at first. And the other aspect to that is that any counselor or coach who is worth their salt will understand best practices in terms of your specific situation and understand your specific behaviors and the way that people-pleasing manifests specifically for you, and can address those things in a way that can help you shift more completely and efficiently. They're called healthcare professionals for a reason. So I hope that that makes sense. And so I'm going to leave it there today. And until the next time, I'll see you guys soon.